The debate has begun over whether Governor Beshear had the authority to sign an executive order banning conversion therapies on minors this week. The term describes counseling aimed at changing someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. The order states that no federal or state funds can be used for the practice, and the state's licensure boards could also take action. Multiple lawmakers have released statements saying the order is a constitutional overstep and they will respond. University of Kentucky political science professor Stephen Voss argues the General Assembly may also have tough choices.
One reason the Republicans are in a tough position is while they don't want governors making policy single-handedly, that's viewed as a violation of the separation of powers, Republicans don't necessarily want to be stuck seeming as though they're fighting on behalf of conversion therapy.
Now, part of Voss's reasoning there is that his position that conversion therapy is not popular with median voters. Several GOP members of Kentucky State Senate released a joint statement saying, quote, "This executive order disregards the First Amendment rights regarding freedom of religion and speech and violates the fundamental parental rights and responsibilities for their children." Senator Thayer, you signed on to that statement. What do you foresee happening in January, given you're not going to be there, but your colleagues will be?
Well, I think this is a typically cynical election year tactic by a hyper-partisan governor. This is an issue we've wrestled with in the General Assembly. There is no agreement that would lead to us being able to pass it, at least in the past couple of years. The bill has been around, sponsored by Republicans too, but we haven't been able to come to agreement on it. So for Governor Beshear to substitute his judgment for the 138 members of the General Assembly is very on brand for him. He's very consistent. He loves to make law, but he does not have the authority to do so. He doesn't make laws. He executes the laws that we pass. And I agree with Professor Voss. This is a classic separation of powers debate. We have three branches of government for a reason, but this governor likes to govern by autonomy. He thinks it's a unilateral place with him at the top and nobody else matters. And I think it's going to be a problem for him as he continues. And just remember, this is the governor who's vetoed over 100 of our bills that we've overridden by wide supermajorities. So this is very on brand for him, and I think it's a cynical attempt for him to try to politicize this event right before an election that's going to go quite badly for Democrats in Kentucky.
The dynamic that's being created, how much would you compare it to the executive order that was done over medical marijuana in 2022, when we saw similar legislation come the following session?
Yeah, medical marijuana polls like in the 80s, and usually around the 80s. So I think eventually the legislature was going to get there. We knew that that was going to happen. This is different because this polls pretty much about the same. It actually polls very heavily in self-identified evangelicals are against this. So the question is, the governor's trying to lay a trap for Republicans, and it's not for Republicans out in rural areas. It's for the suburban Republicans that have to run, or the open seats that are in suburban seats, to get people talking about conversion therapy and having the Republican have to defend why they're so up in arms right now against it. It's a terrible practice. It involves torturing children, electroshock therapy, starvation. It does a lot of these things. It should be banned. It polls highly that it should be banned. Utah has a ban. Chris Christie signed it into a ban. It's not a partisan issue. It's an issue to protect children. But some of the rhetoric that's coming from the other side about this executive order could get them in trouble down the line.
What do you mean by that?
Saying that you're going into First Amendment rights and parental rights. It's a lot of stuff that they're complaining about here was what a lot of people complained Senate Bill 150 did. Was getting away with parents' rights and telling doctors how to practice medicine.
Senator Thayer?
There's a counseling effort here to help kids who are struggling with gender dysphoria during their teens. And it does tie back to the Senate Bill 150 debate. I agree with Jared on that. But the governor's inserted himself into a place where he shouldn't be.
Can you explain some of the political history around some of this issue? Given that there's been prior legislation around this? Well,
I think that the legislation, and I believe it was Senator Julie Rocky Adams that spearheaded it, I think that they were on the right path. Now, obviously, Senator Thayer can tell me the behind-the-scenes stuff, but you still have to get some stuff done. There's still a pretty ultra-conservative caucus in both chambers of the legislature. But I thought, it's always been filed. It's been filed, numerous years. Republicans have supported it. So I do think it's something that's going to get done. I mean, if Utah can do it, surely we can. But I think the governor's this is a little political trap for suburban Republicans to see if they fall into it, is what I think this is.
Similar to the abortion ban, where we've seen some lawsuits brought forward by left-leaning groups on that particular issue. If lawsuits are brought forward on this who would have to have standing in order to successfully carry that?
I mean, I could see the Family Foundation jumping into this and suing on it. And I think it's less about what happens in January and more about what happens in November. I agree with Jared. You know, the Democrats aren't going to make any headway in the election in November. Beshear's probably got his eye on one or two suburban seats or open seats so he can have something to brag about. It's not going to be very much when you have 31 Republicans in the Senate and 80 in the House.
And I do want to say, though, because he did this, this delays if the legislature wants to act, because now it's got to go through the court system, and that's going to take a couple of years, whereas the legislature could say, hey, you know, we want to act on this next year, but now they won't be able to because they're probably going to wait to see the way the court case comes out.
All right, we'll continue to see how it plays out.